Hello, Fractured States players. We're going to walk through the battle report for One Man's Treasure, decisions and outcomes. And we're going to look at 6 decisions that were made in the game that created an outcome. And the reason for this is to not judge the decisions, but to look at the way Fractured States works and hopefully to help us play more effectively in the future. The world, as was described in the event summary, but also in the scenario, was that this is happening just southeast of Fayetteville, North Carolina. There's a swampy area where there's a town of Zillerville and a few other places where the locals have not really been affected by the calamity, but they have a lot going on there. There were 5 teams. I'll run through the team's objectives really quickly. Haygood and Jorgensen's wanted to retrieve the Skillington treasure. They were on orders from Hampton to go find that treasure. Dona Hogawa and Wolf wanted to restore the native lands in the area. Wilkins and Doomson were there to take the mill back for the locals. Wachtmeister and Mann had actually taken the mill over. They were from the north, and they wanted to defend those logging operations, keep them active, and then, of course, keep the railroad franchise, which was taking the lumber and shipping it, active as well. So they were there more for commercial interests. And Steyer and Blunt were a religious organization. They wanted to recruit new followers. So the problems in this really were threefold. You had to determine who was on the field and what their objectives were, because everyone had a different objective that overlapped and oftentimes was in conflict with yours. So you had to figure out who was out there. You had to keep focused because the game purposely threw lots of distractions your way, whether it's the bard telling you a tale or whether it's you hearing firing in the distance. You had to maintain focus on your objective, and you had to decide whether to fight or to negotiate, because you could actually achieve your objectives using either one, as we'll see. So decision number 1, I apologize in advance for the clarity of these images. I took them from Discord, but they're just really a reminder for me and to show you what would happen. But the decision number 1 that we'll look at is Wilkins splits his force. He gives 3 of his units to Doomson, and he takes the remaining units with his wagons to the west. So he effectively splits his command and puts half of it, just under half of it, under Doomson. This, of course, leads to mischief, as Doomson then carves off his own empire, and it causes a problem for Wilkins. So a couple of players made the decision to split their forces, and in fact, in the Fractured States universe, because the soldiers are much more brittle, you always want to keep your forces under your control. So that was one decision that didn't turn out so well for Wilkins. Haygood maintains focus no matter how many distractions I threw at Haygood. The Haygood character, the player would not change his focus. So what you see here is that Haygood early on got a report that the loggers were to the east, and there was a bit of a ruckus going on. And Haygood's some locals contacted Haygood and said, "Hey, take care of those loggers." So he sent Jorgensen's and some cavalry over to check it out, but he maintained focus on finding Skeleton. And in fact, later on, when he was in the big battle with Steyer, he said in the battle, "Yeah, all this fighting is fine, but I'm here to find Skellington." So the Haygood character completely decided to maintain his focus through the whole game. Dona Hogawa scouts Zillerville. So Dona Hogawa could have just ridden into Zillerville, guns blazing. He could have ridden south, guns blazing. He really had a choice. And instead, he held his forces back and he scouted very carefully, and a lot was going on. There were units going by him, there were units going west, there were units going east. And he sent Wolf, his scout, into the village of Zillerville, and Wolf pretended to be a surveyor, and they got information to make their move. And in the end, they negotiated a good outcome for themselves. So his decision to scout versus fight definitely helped him out. Decision 4, Steyer recruits locals. As Steyer went along, he near the Plainview Church, there was a small town. He recruited locals. It added a unit to his forces. It gave him wealth. He did a great job with that, and it definitely built up his power doing that. So his decision to just stop for a moment, recruit locals, helped build strength in his organization. The fifth one was Doomson headed north. So when Doomson was mixing it up with first Wilkins, and then the Wachtmeister folks were coming south to the mill, Doomson headed west, ran into a small company, and then decided to head north to see if he could find more loot that was less protected. So he decided to just take off and go find loot somewhere else. And as a result, he was able to extract some loot out of Zillerville. So his decision to head north and get out of the hottest zone of the battle worked out for him. Finally, Jorgensen switches sides. So I don't even know if the Haygood player even knows this, but his scout switched sides. So Dona Hogawa gave an excellent speech. Jorgensen's thought it was a good speech, and he switched over to the Indian side, and so he went out west and is hanging out with the Indian tribe now, so the Native American tribe. So that was a decision that he made, and so you'll see the results here in a sec. So here was each of the character teams and how they ended up. Haygood got the Skellington treasure based on his focus, and Jorgensen's got scouting rewards, but from Dona Hogawa. So he didn't get it from hanging out with Haygood. He still made his objective of getting some treasure out of the adventure. So even if you change sides in the Fractured States, you can potentially still achieve your objectives. Dona Hogawa and Wolf achieved their objective. They didn't fire a shot, and they restored the Native American tribes in the area. Wilkins did not remove Wachtmeister from the mill, and Doomson achieved his objective of loot. So even though they were on the same team, they both they had different outcomes based on how they played the game. Wachtmeister and Mann, though they played well, Wachtmeister essentially lost the franchise. He lost land, and he has to pay rent to the Native Americans now, so that reduces his profit. And the mill was wrecked. And Mann's, as a result of the mill being wrecked, it reduces Mann's profit. So they did not achieve their objectives in this game, although they had very hard objectives. So no harm, no foul there. And Steyr and Blunt, though they started off with great promise by recruiting locals, ended up getting into that incredible battle at the end, which essentially wiped out the people of the Anointed. And though they fought well and they survived, which is good, they didn't actually, all the followers that they recruited ended up getting killed in the battle. So they didn't achieve their objectives. So I hope you enjoyed that little rundown. If you look in the 6 decisions about the way Fractured States works, you can see that there's certain things that help you play the game. And a couple of high points are keep all your men together, keep them under your control, or they will evaporate. And always figure out what's going on, because the Fractured States is not as straightforward as other IKS games. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned a few things. And we'll see you on the next Fractured States scenario. Thanks so much.